Thanks for finding us again. Another edition of No Stoplights. As usual, I want to thank our sponsors. I'll lead in with our most recent addition to our sponsor lineup. The Florence County Legislative Delegation is now officially a sponsor of No Stoplights, as is Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Micky Finn's, Victor's, Marlboro MPD Electric Co-op. I can't imagine what Marlboro MPD Electric Co-op are doing as we speak because of all the circumstances in Georgia, in western South Carolina, and the mountains of North Carolina. I got to believe there's kind of a fraternity or brotherhood amongst those electric co-ops, and I just got to believe that Marlboro MPD Electric Co-op are very dispersed across the Southeast dealing with storm victims and trying to restore power in a lot of these places that have been devastated. I mean, no doubt devastated. McCall Farms is also a sponsor. Pepsi, Florence is a sponsor. PLC Commercial Real Estate or sponsor. McLeod Health as well. So thank you to all these variety of sponsors, and welcome aboard Florence County Legislative Delegation. I don't have a script. I don't know if itinerary is the right word. I certainly isn't the right word, but I don't have a sheet that I've shared with a guest about what we're talking about, what the issues we'll discuss are.
It's not a Democrat debate.
It's not. You're right. Okay,
you don't give me the notes.
I didn't give them the answers or the questions without giving them you. He just introduced himself before I do that. Robert Cahaly, Senior Strategist of Trafalgar, is our guest today. Robert is one of the, I think, the preeminent pollster in all the Republican politics today. He gets accused of being a Republican pollster. But Robert told me one day, and I've never forgotten it, he said, I'm not a Republican pollster. I'm someone who gets paid to provide accurate analytics of elections and, I guess, issues. And my opinions are not respected or appreciated if they're inaccurate. So you can call me a pollster. I rather say I provide accurate and interesting information to people who have a willingness to pay for it and find value in it. But Robert and I go back before Trafalgar. Robert had a company, Gas and the Green, and I was once elected. I took twice elected county councilman from, he likes to hear this, a town with no stoplight. And Robert and I met in 2009.
Yes.
2009, actually met at a Lizard's Thicket. I told the story last night, Robert. Karen Floyd.
What a great sponsor Lizard's Thicket would
be. You're right. I mean, no doubt about it. They've got one here in town, so we'll talk to Robert about that. But no, Karen Floyd was the GOP chairman of the state of South Carolina, friend of yours, friend of mine. I went to see Karen after I got coaxed or talked into running for lieutenant governor of South Carolina, and I didn't know where to go. I mean, I didn't have any idea what I was doing, to be honest with you. And I sat down with Karen at California Dreaming in Columbia, and I asked her advice on who I should hire to run my campaign. And Karen said, I mean, the likely suspect, the Quins. I mean, they did a lot of work in the Republican universe, but she brought up your name. And I met you at a Lizard's Thicket. We go from California Dreaming with Karen Floyd to Lizard's Thicket in Columbia.
And we know exactly what my speed is.
Well, I mean, we kind of made a deal. I mean, we kind of made a deal from there. And I'll say this on the podcast because this is not for terrestrial radio. When you go through a political shitstorm together, you build a bond. And Robert never ran for cover, never disowned the candidate. We kind of stuck in there and hung through it. It turned out a certain way, but the world continues and life goes on. He's ended up in a much better place. I think I've ended up in an okay place. And I want to say this. I'll look at the camera. There is nobody in this sport or game or business that I am happier for than Robert Cahaly. He paid his dues. He did what it took to become a preeminent Republican pollster on the national scene now, and he's decided he's agreed to join us. He actually helped me with an event we did last night. Stayed over today, and Robert is with us today. So welcome, sir, to our humble city of Florence and the PD region of South Carolina.
Well, it's always good to be in the PD. I came from the upstate, and my town only had one stoplight at the time. It has a lot more now, unfortunately. And I didn't really understand what the PD was until I went to Carolina. And then I met a bunch of people from Florence, and I began to understand the unique part of the state, the unique culture, and became a great appreciator of it. And to watch, as I worked at the State House, the intelligence of so many people from the PD and for many years, the disproportionate amount of power that was gathered. And I was like, these people got something down there. There's something these people are sharp. There's something going on down there. And so it was always something that once I understood and how, South Carolina was so different that, I ended up working for David Beasley. I was first job I had out of college. And I had my first chicken bog. It was just like I started really getting into kind of how things work. And he gave me a crash course on a lot of things in this area. So it's always good to be back. I think a lot of it, I've enjoyed it, and enjoy the people here, know a lot of people here. And
why did you decide to take me on as a candidate?
Well, first of all, Trafalgar did exist then.
It did?
It did.
I didn't know that.
It was on your bills.
Okay.
But it was the second year, back in 2008, was the first time we ever endeavored to poll. I'd been a general campaign consultant doing everything from congressional races all the way down to like local races for about 15 years at that point. In college, out of college. College took a little bit of time. But I hated the polling I was getting. It was just terrible. And I had seen Rod Shealy, who was a consultant that I really didn't like Rod at the time. And it wasn't I didn't like him as a person. He always treated me as like, I don't know, just like a little puppy on his lap that he was teaching. And it really bothered me. And that was just my own insecurities. But anyway, but I did learn a lot from him. And I watched kind of how he did polling, and I thought it was really good. And the way he was doing it was better. So 2008 was the first year we ever did it. And the first year we did it statewide was in your race. And his race, the Attorney General's race, and the governor's race, we nailed it better than everybody else. And so, and that was just a little bit about the polling part. But no, when you meet with a candidate, everybody who's ever done campaign consulting, which is not something I really do anymore, because I don't get, frankly, not every candidate is as good as you are. The thing is, you knew what you didn't know, which was important, and you had a personal appeal. The reason your podcast is successful, the reason you were a successful salesman, it's all the same skill. And you have a skill that makes you're compelling to people. They want to like you. And that is a really difficult thing to do. People act like it's easy, but it's not. It's some of the same reason, we act like, oh, everybody changes a lot since school, but there's always, if you notice, most schools, there's always some guys and girls who were popular and stayed popular because they weren't popular just because of their looks, or because they were rich. They were popular because their personalities were compelling. And that's just something that people have or they don't. It's hard to give it to them, but it's also many ways a double-edged sword, because people who are easily liked tend to get away with stuff and like my brother, he is a fantastic salesman, but he says what he thinks, which makes me scared as heck if he ever ran for office. He really says what he thinks. Can control it a little bit, but it's hard when you're that compelling. You want to do what you do best, but just say exactly what you think. And you can't always do that. But you knew what you didn't know, and you were willing to be taught. And you didn't start with this, well, I know what to do here. I'm looking for an advisor's kind of a second opinion. A lot of these candidates think they are political geniuses. They're not. I always joke that the minute your name goes up on that banner, you start losing IQ points, and it gets worse as you get closer to the election. But I also have to tell staff, be careful. It's easy for you to judge these people, but your name isn't on the ballot. The rest of your life is not going to be defined by what happens in June or November of that year. You don't understand the pressure. You don't understand what that's like. And so it didn't take me long to figure out that you had the raw candidate skill, you had the right attitude, and I thought you could bring something that wasn't already there. When I looked at what was kind of lining up to run, I didn't see anybody else like you that was looking at that particular race. And frankly, there weren't a lot of people in many of the races like you. And so I was like, this is the guy that's, he can go a long way. And that was what convinced me. You help people a lot of different reasons, but I just feel like this, there's something. This guy's got a substance. He's got a great story. He is the American story. I mean, he comes from a small town. He's made good of himself. He's built something, and people like to hear about building something. And then this day and age, they want to hear about something other than the traditional blah, 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 undergrad, blah, 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 law school. Nobody, that's great if you want to be attorney general. But nobody wants all their politicians to do that. We've had enough people who have the perfect little resume, and they work to the perfect little firm, and now they want to offer themselves for politics.
Robert, you told me one day early in our campaign that you sensed a high degree of populism. And I just remember that. I remember one of our conversations, and you kind of consider me a populist candidate, and you said there's this wave. I mean, I just sense there's this wave. I mean, we'll get to Trump in a second, but what about that time did you sense this populism brewing in the Republican Party?
Well, everybody has to understand that one of the things that my college term paper was on Huey Long. Huey Long was one of the most populous leaders of the 20th century in America. Governor of Louisiana. Sometimes you see me on TV, the little white bobblehead, the guy in the hat, and it's Huey Long. I do a lot of work in Louisiana. One of my key people is in Louisiana. And it just fascinating about how he built everything he built. And he had the people that were so behind him. But he was one of the first populist leaders. So I recognize populism moving as early as Buchanan challenging Bush in the 92 primary, Perot in the 92 general election, and that there was this wave of people who didn't fit in either party at the time, who didn't like what just kind of common man, like what's going on isn't right. And a lot of that was economic populism that was rooted in trade. The idea of shipping Americans, make somebody on Wall Street some extra money, ship a bunch of jobs overseas, and then devastate a bunch of small towns. Like, is it really, in the long run, is it even good for the country to make some rich people richer and devastate small towns? Also we can get a trinket for 10% less.
So why did Romney win? Why was McCain the nominee? I mean, if you sense that in the 90s.
McCain wasn't populist.
No, well, I mean, you're right. I mean, it would have been a neocon. But what I'm saying is, why did it take from 92, when you think it began, to 2016 for Trump to become the Republican nominee based on this populist energy?
Well, part of it, and this is what we discovered when studying the 2016 primaries, part of it was the people became disenchanted after the 92 general election.
The data shows that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of them quit voting. And then they weren't welcome in the Republican circles because they were perceived as the ones who got Clinton elected. So even if they felt that way, even if they had been a Perot person, they didn't want to talk about it. They were a shy Perot person, to coin a phrase. And so they didn't like Clinton. They didn't like Bush. But they didn't really have a home. And, and some of them got involved in the party that was kind of left over from Perot. Some of them got involved in Buchanan's later elections. And they started as early as 2000 trying to talk Trump into doing it. And, he had said no a few times. But, I think that they really didn't feel like they had a home. In 2000, that race was just neck and neck. They certainly knew that Al Gore wasn't their home. If you might remember, a lot of people aren't old enough to remember this, but Perot debated Al Gore about NAFTA on TV. So Al Gore wasn't their candidate, and they saw NAFTA got accomplished against their wishes under Clinton, and Gore was the one debating Perot, so they weren't for Gore. 9/11 kind of put all that on the back burner. And so, it started to kind of pop up again. I would tell you a lot of those voters found a home in 2008 or early 2007 with Governor Huckabee. And but for a snowstorm and the upstate, Huckabee would have probably won South Carolina and gone on to win that nomination. But it did snow.
little things make big differences.
Especially in a place he was leading that big. Yeah.
Okay, now I want to go back. You were talking about polling. You didn't like the polling, didn't trust the polling, thought the polling sucked. So you became a pollster.
So in 2008, we started doing it as one of these services we provided. 2010, we realized just how good it was, because then I had access to others' polling.
We were a quarter of a point off in my race in 2010. 1/4 of 1 point. You told me 10 days out, here's what we're going to win by, and it was within 1/4 of 1 point.
And we had the best poll in Nicky's race too. And it was like, all right, we have something. Now we have to test it. So then we had a little setback. Some of the technology that I was employing and doing polls was kind of unprecedented in South Carolina.
Controversial.
Could be treated as controversial if you didn't understand what was being done. But I knew that the way that I read the law, you couldn't do it. So, but I asked the Attorney General if using this type of polling would be an exception to the law, because South Carolinians would be losing this economical way to poll. And Attorney General McMaster gave us a written opinion that he would have considered an exception. Well, I did not understand that angry sled directors do not consider Attorney General's opinions as sacrosanct as the rest of us do. Now, everyone knows probably a lot about Reggie Lloyd these days, so we're not going to get into Reggie Lloyd, but there were a lot of agendas in place. And so I went through a little bit of a point where they were misunderstanding what happening. They didn't understand that if you call 10,000 people, you are putting a push call out there. If you call 500 people, you're getting a snapshot. The whole deal was that they understood that, then they wouldn't have reacted the way they did and accused what it was. But I went through a whole mess with a sled and then a new sled director who was a good guy, and Attorney General kicked something down to prosecute 2 years to say he didn't do anything wrong. But there was always a fear that some prosecutor down the road could pick it back up. So then I said, well, I'm not satisfied with that. Just not charge me. That's not good. And they weren't near the headlines. So we took them to federal court. We thought the whole law was unconstitutional, because how can one level of political speech has to have the lowest level? Like, if anybody can do it, you can do it for political. And so we took them to court. We won, which is why I was an advocate of Michelle Childs. Would have been a much better Supreme Court kick if Biden wanted what he said he wanted, because she was fair as she could be. Obama appointee, but she was fair. She ruled in our favor. And then the insurance reserve fund that represented the guys who went after us appealed, and we won at 3-judge panel. So now the law they used has been stricken from the record, and I got my legal fees paid. And yes, I risked a couple $100,000 for $1,000 fine.
I'm dealing with my issues, and you're dealing with yours. They're separate to one another, but we're kind of talking to one another about it.
And it was a simple stuff.
But did you fear for your reputation? Did you consider whether or not you could continue down the road of being?
Absolutely, and that's what everybody told me, because when I talked about Rod earlier, Rod had been through something like that, and he took the plea. And everybody said, "Yeah, it's $1,000 fine. You can just pay the fine." And I'm like, but if I admit that I did something wrong, and I know I didn't, and I know I got an AG's opinion, then everybody always said Rod couldn't get a job in national politics because of that. So I can't do that. So yeah, I risked a couple $100,000 of my own dollars for $1,000 fine. And a lot of people thought that was stupid. Just put it behind you. Take PTI. And I'm like, no, you don't know me. I mean, if I got caught doing something that was wrong, I would take the deal, but I didn't.
You get the good court decision when? What year would that have been?
That took till 2014. So
there's this 4 years of complete and total uncertainty in your political life.
Absolutely. And people hired me, but they hired me through somebody else.
Sure.
And it was kind of a no man's land. It was very difficult. And
what did you learn about yourself during those 4 years?
First of all, I wish that every person would never have to go through this. And I wish every person would have to go through this. I hated the bad parts. But the good part is you can separate out who your friends are and who they aren't. There are people who not only didn't call, didn't ask how you doing, didn't say, can I do something for you? There are people that you have been friends with for years who would act like they did not see you at a social function. I mean, it was weird, but it was a learning experience like no other. And a lot of the time, I find myself, even if I don't like the person who's in trouble, giving them a call and saying, hey, I know what you're going through. You know,
because Robert, it's not that you're just, and this is what you and I share, it's not just that you're in trouble and everybody knows you're in trouble, and the media is trying to define what the trouble is. And that's the frustrating part about what you dealt with and what I dealt with.
And you don't even get a chance. You got lawyers telling you can't even talk to the public and tell them, but the other side can tell them everything. And right after the 2010 elections, when there was nothing but good news for Republicans, a negative story on a Republican consultant, mine made national news. And yes, I'm going to take credit for something. I was the first guy, not Donald Trump, to take my mugshot and put it everywhere and make a joke of it. I put it on my Facebook page. I had to have a judge tell me to take it down because I wasn't taking the case seriously. So yes, I did. And I did that first.
And we've said this to one another before, but I want to know the record. I mean, there were several people in my investigation and my campaign finance problems that wanted me to roll on you. And they wanted me to kind of kick you while you were down. And you know this. I mean, I owned every second of it. And I'll look at the camera. Robert Cahaly had nothing to do with my transgressions. They were all mine. They were separate of any advice that he gave me. He never knew what I was doing.
You told me one point you did some of that stuff because you didn't want me to know.
Well, I didn't want you to know because I knew I was doing it the wrong way. And I didn't want to embarrass you. And I didn't know what to. I mean, it goes back to me not knowing what I was doing. You know what I mean? And being a little bit embarrassed about how I did it and why I did it, what I should have done and why I didn't do it. But there was an effort, and you know this, and you know who they were. There was an effort on the inside.
And they know who they were.
Yeah, sure they do. But there was an effort inside to kind of say, hey, you could walk if you roll on your guy, and we can figure out a way to blame him for this as well. And that's probably one of
the same thing is coming to me, and whether it was what they were trying to do with it to the speaker at the time,
which was Bobby,
or you. And they were saying, hey, what can you tell us here? And I'm like, I'm not aware of anything I can tell you. I even went as far as to even take a lie detector test in your stuff and passed. And I'm like.
But Robert, that's the shitty part of this business.
Well, and they were like, well, you need to testify against him. I said, I'm not testifying against my client. You're crazy.
And I said, I'm not testifying against my consultant. You're crazy. And I took my medicine and you took yours. I don't want to move on because I don't want to sound disgruntled. I mean, you've ended up in a great place.
And that's fine. I will say one other thing, though. When they do that, a lot of people, and we see this happen to a lot of young people who get pushed into this stuff where some kind of law enforcement pushes them into something and tells me, you need to say this or be prepared to go hire lawyers and defend yourself. And when they say something like, well, we can indict you or you can testify, a lot of people just buckle. And I'm saying, well, oh, you want to really be embarrassed? Why don't you try and indict me? And that was my reaction. Like, after everything I went through, well, I get bad headlines? Hey, you guys want to indict me? You're going to lose again.
That's well explained. All right, I want to move forward. So you go through your troubles and turmoils. You end up on the other side. You win the court case.
And 2016 comes around.
And that's where I want to go. So here's what I want people to understand. And maybe I'm saying this the wrong way. So you're confident in your polling. I became very confident in your polling. And after I left office, they threw me out of office. After I left office, people would ask me about, who's winning this race? I said, what does Cahaly's poll say? Who's winning that race? What does Cahaly's poll say? I had that much confidence in your polling, but Trump decides to run in 16. And the way I've explained it to people, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, that Cahaly built a mousetrap that found the people that would vote for Trump but wouldn't verbalize they were voting for Trump. Is that an accurate assessment?
It is an accurate assessment, but the way it happened was a little different in that we were at the time representing the Republican House caucus. And I thought it'd be a great idea for the House caucus to essentially poll the entire state in the president's primary so that all the members could know how thousands of people in their districts were going to vote in those primaries, which would help them understand their constituents ideologically within the party. And so we started doing a series of polls across the state. And one day I get a call from this guy from Real Clear Politics. And he says, we keep seeing these polls you're putting out there and they look really good. And it's just random call, comes in on like a Saturday, and thank goodness I had good people working for me, found me. And I talked to the guy all the way from Columbia back to the upstate. And they agreed to publish what we're doing. So that step of getting our work included somewhere that would have national prominence made a big difference. So we learned in the primaries, we immediately sent something after we could see the results in South Carolina, that our automated versus our live calls, Trump would always do better in the automated, about 3 points. And so it began this idea that there's a hidden vote that people, and what is called as the social desirability bias. And that's when people do not want to say, they give a person an answer to a question that is very much designed to make them look good in the eyes of the person that's asking the question versus what they really feel. And we do this in life all the time. Somebody says, how do I look in this dress? You say, oh, you look great, when they look terrible. That's just human nature. And it's pretty bad in the South, especially. We're not that blunt. We're very nuanced and kind. But so I knew this is happening. And this was not unfamiliar to me because I grew up in partially the North Carolina media market because I was in the upstate of South Carolina. And I was privy to Thurman and Helms were on the same cycle. Their Senate seats were always up at the same time. And I remember hearing that Helms was always, if he was only losing by 3 or 4 or 5, he was going to win. Because there's that many people who wouldn't say they're going to vote for Helms who were. And so I knew this phenomenon existed. Now, I didn't know the technical term, which is social desirability bias, but I realized we had that going on. And we also had another phenomenon, which is people who hadn't voted in a long time turning out to vote. And I looked at, and we followed and, polled in the Georgia and the Florida primary, and it's like the same thing. Tons of new people. Didn't know how to use the machines. Just people that hadn't voted in a long time. And so after all it was over, we pulled this data. We looked, all right, who are these people? And a lot of them were those people who stopped voting in 1992. Some of them were people who stopped voting in 96. And some of them were the ones who had only voted in 2010 and not come back. And so it was one of those things where we developed a system of being able to identify who those hidden voters were that were kind of coming out of the woodwork in a primary, and said, all right, this is going to go deeper in a general. And I, anecdote, things happen. And one of the things that happened that really helped us understand it was we're all sitting around and we're talking about something at my house one day, and the DirecTV guy comes by to fix something, and he's like, that Trump guy, I like that Trump guy. And I was like, really? I said, you Republican? He's like, no. I'm never voted for, but I registered to vote for him. I said, really? So then, of course, I'm basically giving the guy a poll.
Sure.
And learning everything I can about him. And he's like, he's the only one that ever cared about me. And it was like fascinating to me. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. So we go into 2016 fall, and I went back to something that Rod Shealy had said. And it was, you got to give people a polite way to tell you something impolite sometimes. And what he had said was, he would say, well, all right, I understand this is what you think. What do you think most of your neighbors think? So there's a lot of ways to do this, but this is one of the most basic and easiest. So we started asking in the fall. Okay, I understand that's what you think. Who do you think most of your neighbors are voting for? And we saw a difference, and Hillary Clinton never went up and Trump never went down. And we saw it in different states in different degrees. And just really kind of started pulling it apart and thinking, all right, so where the vote has got to fall somewhere between these two numbers. Somewhere between the numbers where it's going to fall. And the funny thing is, the state with the biggest difference was Ohio. Now, when we started saying Ohio isn't just going to be won by Trump, but isn't going to be close, they said, you're crazy. Ohio was a swing state. Like, no. Ohio had the biggest number we'd ever seen. It was 8-point difference.
You're talking about the difference being in who you're voting for and who are your neighbors voting for.
Right.
Trump would have been what when who you're voting for? In your poll, he would have been what?
I don't remember exactly, but I remember it was an 8-point difference.
So when you say who are your neighbors voting for, his numbers go
Trump
up.
Went from like down 2 to up 6. And so it's like, this is going to be significant. And so we started measuring it. And we started looking at what it was, and then we started looking at who was saying it, which people were telling us. And that was also fascinating, because then a lot of people telling us were some of those African-American males who now are a little more bold and saying they're for Trump. They were the ones saying they thought a lot of people they knew were going to vote for him. And we had a lot of female voters that were moms were saying it. And we had people that would say they were independent, but in states that don't register by party, it's hard to tell where you are, especially if you haven't voted very much. So we found it a lot in newly registered people. And so, but we were just monitoring it. And so when we put out predictions that showed Trump winning states like Pennsylvania and Michigan and so on, I mean, everybody, I remember it was like, man, you have all these decision points in your life that you look back on and you said, this could have gone this way or this way. And I was having a particular interview, and I think it was one of two. One of them was Life Zet magazine. It was an online magazine, and it was Laura Ingraham group, and another one. They were just like, because we became kind of like these crazy people thought Trump was going to win. And so we started, and because we're all listed on Real Clear Politics, people were looking up there and going, there's just one group that's going. And so
you were the outlier.
Oh, yeah. And so, just getting beat up. And one of them said, well, so you're saying you think he's going to win? Unequivocally. And I said, absolutely. And they said, you're willing to stake your reputation with that? I said, I'm going to put it this way. Wednesday, I'm going to be the guy who got it right, or the guy no one's ever going to listen to about polling again. It's that simple. And I didn't back off at all. And I said, and then our map said he's going to break 300 electoral votes. And they said that was crazy too. We actually predicted 306 to 232. It was 306 to 232. Now, we did not get it perfect. We got 3 states wrong, but they worked together to keep the same electoral count.
How was your life changed since then?
Well, you have, first, it was just crazy. I mean, like, we had media people calling us, and I had a real opportunity to be on Megyn Kelly's show the day after the election. And then there was some kind of, like, police action with some rioters out in front of Trump Tower, and my segment got bumped. That would have been an opportunity that would have continued to roll into other things probably for a couple months. That happening, it was quiet. There was a lot of recognition, but it wasn't a lot of media. It wasn't until as they started looking to future elections that they started coming back, and it started being more. And one of the things we did is we started, I got on social media very early. I mean, our Twitter account's like 2009. I mean, when they first started, I had Gmail at like 2002. I mean, so we were able to freeze frame what we said. We weren't just one of the people who claimed they said Trump was going to win. You could see on our social media, both the companies and mine, a date where we said something, and there it was. And so we had that proof because believe you me, the number of people who said we were the ones who called the Trump election is like 30 different pollsters. Now, none of them have something they can point to like that. They don't. But we do. And so we really used what I had learned about how to keep the stuff in front of everybody and kept reminding people. And frankly, I trolled a few of them. Okay, these folks, they weren't right in 2024. I mean, 2016. And we, started trolling a lot of them. We had a lot of the media who had kind of started following us just to see.
Nate Silver? Didn't you have kind of a Twitter feud or battle with Nate Silver?
I had one at one point.
And he's the 538 guy from ABC News.
He was. And, I've come to realize that when he got outside of Disney's yoke, I like Nate a lot more than I like the people that run that thing. Because he's just a statistician.
He's an aggregator, modeler. Is that kind of sort of?
It is. And the fact is, he criticizes all day, but he didn't want us not to be in his aggregate. He can throw us out.
Smart guy?
I think so, yes.
And not controlled by Disney has liberated him.
Oh, unquestionable.
To call it more like he sees it.
Absolutely.
Oh, let's stay there for a second. So when a CBS poll comes out, or an NBC, or an ABC, or a Wall Street Journal poll, you've told me before that you put some credence in the New York Times poll. You think there's a solid methodology behind that, but you have no faith at all in the other mainstream polls.
And the thing is, I don't really judge the methodology because everyone wants to dig into that. You know what I judge? Error rate over time.
Explain that.
Error rate over time. So what that is in each race, what the margin you said it would be versus what happened. And so, for example, in your race, when you said it was off by a quarter point, okay, that would be a 0.25 error rate. That's really good. And so a lot of these groups, like Real Clear Politics, has done a cumulative one all the way back since 2014, I think. And on their cumulative one, we're all ranked by our error rate over time. And of the groups that do, 10 polls or more, we're number 2. Emerson College is just ahead of us, and which makes us the number 1 private company that does polling. And New York Times is right there, and Insider Advantage, Matt Towery, who I do a podcast with, Polling Plus. Check it out. Once a week, you get to hear Matt and I's inside dope on politics. Is really just us talking and you getting to listen. It's a lot of fun. But and it's New York Times is the only poll mixed in there. So it's Emerson College, New York Times, Insider Advantage, and Trafalgar were the top 4 cumulatively.
Why do you get accused of being a Trump-biased pollster? And how do you respond to that?
It's tough. I mean, I guess what I say is I'm a pollster who happens to be a Republican. And if you think because I'm Republican, that means that I'm always in the tank for Republicans, then maybe you don't understand that I'm the guy who said Tester was going to win in 2018 and got poo-pooed by the Republican Party for saying so. He did win. I've said a lot of Democrats were going to win when they won. And I didn't want to. I like John James. I predicted what he was going to lose by an almost exact margin. And I wanted John James to win. So if you say that I must be biased because I'm a Republican and a pollster, then are the Democrats that work at the liberal universities, how did they get a pass? Are the liberal news organizations that lean left, why did they get a pass? We're either all putting our thumb on the scales, none putting our thumb on the scales, or judge us by how close we are to the results, and you decide who's putting their thumbs on the scales. And that's what I would tell you. Judge us by the results. It's just simply the results. I mean, you can go to Real Clear Politics and look at it. They rank them. And not like this voodoo stuff like 538's doing. I mean, 538 literally has ABC as the second best polling company in the country. ABC, which is the bottom of everybody's list. But ABC, which is the owner of this company, which happens to own them, are a subsidiary of Disney. And so that didn't mean anything. So they're not using, they put a lot of other stuff in the mix. Real Clear Politics simply looks by error rate. If your polling company ain't on the Real Clear Politics list, it means they don't do enough stuff to even be measured. And this is the other important point. A lot of these firms that always tell you how great polling they are, they avoid one thing very importantly. They don't poll anything the last 2 weeks in election because they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to be ranked. And the polls that are out there that suddenly quit polling close, it's like the kid who says, I'm too smart to take a test. They don't want to be tested.
The Republican has an advantage today, whether it's Trump or not, in what I call electoral college bias. The Republican can lose the popular vote by somewhere around 2.5, 3 points and win the electoral college. Why are so many big media outlets doing national polls? Is it just to make a media splash and create a story? Because you said something last night about reflecting the narrative or the electorate.
Polls are designed to affect the electorate or reflect the electorate. I mean, it really should be a snapshot to reflect where the electorate is.
How interested are you in the national number at Trafalgar? The popular vote?
Not very. I mean, we've done them. I don't like doing it. It's a nice thing to do before you get to the fall, but now they're irrelevant. It's a good, thumb in the air early. But now it doesn't matter because now we're on the states. Like I said, it is like being obsessed with the number of hits in a baseball game. It has no relevance to who's going to win. The only thing that it does help you understand is if the national popular vote is close, Republicans are winning. The Democrats have got to be up significantly in the popular vote to make sure they win. I want
to go back to this because I love your take on this. A lot of us try to understand the Trump voter. I make the argument, and maybe you disagree, that the Trump voter is a Trump voter to some degree. They're not ideologically driven. They don't read the Wall Street Journal. They don't subscribe to the National Review. They didn't care what George Will or William Buckley. I mean, you and I would be kind of prodigies or students of that generation of Republican politics. But in all honesty, do we know? You said something last night that somewhere between 5 and 10% of the people who voted for Bill Clinton twice are probably Trump voters. Who is the Trump voter from your research?
Well, yeah, and I think, go back to 1982. The Trump voter is about 90% of the people who voted for Perot. The Trump voter is about 10% of people who voted for Bill Clinton, 10 to 5, and about 80% of people who voted for Bush. Because a lot of things have happened. The Republican Party and the Democrat Party have literally, in many ways, switched places. the Republican Party was really the party of big business, major corporate contributions, seen to be the war hawk party, and the party of a lot of what I would call kind of establishment. Some people said country club, but it was a bunch of economic conservatives who tolerated social conservatives just to get to a coalition. And they're not rich Republicans were the social conservatives. But the people who, a lot of your hourly workers and people who are middle and lower middle class just didn't see the Republican Party as relating to them. They thought the Republican Party wasn't for them. And what has happened, and this is, like I said, I think it started then. It started with kind of the Buchanan brigades and the Perot and the Reform Party and all. It was kind of brewing. It was brewing, and the Tea Party movement came, and so a lot of those people kind of came back into the Tea Party movement, and there was this average person kind of revolt. And the average people are looking around going, there's a system. And it's like a system that's rigged, that these two groups that kind of like each other get along great, and they just toss leadership back and forth between them, and we all lose. And they didn't like it. And so in 2016, I think it coalesced under Trump because he was just so different and so raw. And it wasn't that they thought Washington, and people kept saying Washington was broken. These people didn't think Washington was broken. They thought Washington was a well-oiled machine and taking care of the people that it was supposed to take care of, and they wanted to break it. They wanted to see this well-oiled machine and throw a monkey wrench in it. And they said, Donald Trump is a monkey wrench. We throw him into this engine and something is going to happen. It can't get worse for me than that. And it was a sheer protest. I want something different. He seems to hear me. He seems to, these forgotten people who were doing, union members who felt like their leadership was selling them out, everything from the waitress who figured both parties didn't care about her. I mean, there's tons of people that were just, neither party cares about me. This guy hears me. And so that's where they came from. They weren't ideological. They were just angry. They just had all they could take of government saying all these things and saying what it takes to get elected and then forgetting about it. And they kept, like J.D. Vance's life story is the story of a lot of the Republican Party. And by 2012, a lot of them weren't going to vote for Romney because Romney was the guy
the Bain Capital guy
who killed the small town and shipped their jobs overseas. And they just weren't voting for that anymore.
So let's stay here. Has Trump, is America First a better future for the Republican Party than what I'll call the post-Reagan neoconservative globalist mindset? Is it?
Well, I can't speak to what is a better. I don't know
what is better. More likely to win elections.
A combination of them both.
Is that possible? Is that achievable?
Of course it is.
With Trump?
Yeah.
Is it easier without him?
No.
Explain.
When you say with or without, it really, 2024 will guide what the future of America First is. Does America First, in every kind of a battle, there's a side that kind of won and a side that kind of lost. And so when they come together, like every merger, one group has a little advantage. So let's look at a scenario Trump loses. The only way the Republicans have a shot at ever having a majority again is the party to come back together, but they can't throw them out. So they have to come back together, but the America First people aren't drawing the lines, but they have to be throwing some bones. Trump wins. The other side of the Republican Party has to come back together. And this time, the America First people are calling the shots. But there has to be a coming back together of this for the long term, because they really don't disagree as much as they think they disagree. I mean, when you look at tariffs, I'm like, tariffs, boogeyman. How many tariffs against China did Biden get rid of? Like none? When Trump said he was going to put 100% tariff on Chinese cars, electric cars, did y'all pay attention? Canada did it. And Biden said he would do it. That's not different. And so some of these, and that's the Democrat Party. So you can make the case that America being strong and looking out for its interests around the world is part of America first. So these things do, they're not these monoliths that cannot be merged. Now, is the Republican Party going to be the ship all the manufacturing overseas? No. Does America want the manufacturing shipped overseas anymore? No. So it's like there's become an American consensus. It's better to build things here. COVID taught us a lot about depending on other places. A lot. And, had the strike gone on a little longer, we'd have learned a lot about even more that we depend on that comes from overseas.
Let's this is interesting to me. So whether it's 5 weeks or 5 years, there's a life after Trump. He's been a unbelievably consequential American political figure. I call him a political blunt instrument. People say Trump's a cancer on the system, Robert. I argue no. He's the most unregulated, non-FDA approved chemo we've ever released on the system. And it's changed. It fundamentally changed the party that you and I are a part of. But I asked you last night, don't you explain to our viewers, when we try to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, when Trump leaves in 5 weeks or 5 years and there's not a dominant force.
Leave in 5 weeks.
Well, I mean, you see where I'm at. I mean, but who's in that room when we make these concessions, when we work some of these disagreements out? Who in your eyes are important and instrumental in advancing America first, whether Trump is, at the front and center or not?
I think you have to have people who can speak to both sides.
Who are they?
I'll tell you, one of the first people is Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham, because, I know there's a lot of people who don't like him, but he is a guy who can speak, who has Trump's ear, and he believes very differently than a lot of America First people about U.S. foreign policy.
But he needs to be in the room.
Yeah. I mean, I think Lindsey's one of the guys who can reach both sides. I think that you've got to have people that have not just been out there trashing him. I think Josh Hawley is an important voice that should be in that room. I think that DeSantis is in there. I think that you're going to see...
certainly J.D. Vance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that goes up. Yeah, absolutely. J.D. Vance. Another guy who's literally had his foot in both sides, I mean, to an unbelievable degree, he shocked everybody in his political circle when he endorsed Trump, is Henry McMaster. I mean, that was the most unpredictable move anybody could have seen. Henry McMaster, who is a product of the mainline Republican Party. I mean, the guy is just, love him.
Former state chair.
I mean, I've been for the guy for running for so many things. I mean, the guy ran against Fritz Hollings in 1986.
But you had to believe a Bush endorsement's coming or something like that. Is what you're saying from Henry.
Or nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't see it. And it because it was just so, I mean, I don't know whether he wanted it, but I would say Henry should be in the room because he understands how to talk to all of them. And there are a lot of names that you just don't know that are not public names. I think Mike Pompeo's got to be there. But there are a lot of other people that have been behind the scenes doing things. I mean, it's disproportionately South Carolina. I'd tell you another one. Ed McMullen, U.S. Ambassador to Switzerland. He was someone who knew Trump years before and ran Trump's entire effort in 2016. He literally did not come from that world, but he just happened to know Trump. And he was very much, guy ran the policy council. I mean, he was very establishment. So there are a lot of people. I mean, it is not. I mean, I know that they think they're at odds, but you can secure the border. You can take care of Americans and spend money defending America's interests around the world. We can do both. We can do both. And we do a lot of stuff we don't need to be doing, but we're capable of both. And it's possible to have a party who believes America first includes America's interest.
Would you agree that J.D. Vance's performance at the debate last week was an example of what I call the intellectual underpinning required to take America first further down the road as a serious political movement? I mean, you would agree populism is not a coherent governing philosophy. I mean, it's raw energy, and there's no way. I mean, it changes. There's no doubt. But I've argued before that there's got to be some intellectual underpinning, some policy notions about what America first really means. And J.D. Vance, to me, last week really demonstrated that can happen.
Well, one of the things, and you got to understand, I've been following J.D. Vance for a while.
As have I.
This is the J.D. Vance that I saw kick Mandel's butt in that debate in the Senate primary way back. When he was... a lot of people sought my advice in that race, and I said, this guy's got something. This guy's going to really have some potential in there. And believe you me, the establishment did not want this guy. I mean, they did not.
But Peter Thiel did.
And more importantly, everybody knew when Trump made a decision and a four-way race without a runoff, that was going to be the winner. It was just a matter of which one he picked. But so JD didn't surprise me. But in the national, he was a meme. He was like a boogeyman. And all of a sudden, here he is, and he just starts knocking this rational stuff out. Just boom, 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 calmly delivering articulate, well thought out point-for-point arguments. I've said before, his answer on the environment is where we ought to be as Republicans.
What is that answer?
That answer is, okay, you care about the environment. What do you do? What do you do to make it better? One, you pollute less. You want to stop polluting? Stop building things in countries that pollute more. If you really, truly cared about the environment, you would bring all manufacturing to Japan, Western Europe, and the United States, because those places are industrial and don't pollute as much. You wouldn't build anything in India and China if you really cared about the environment. If you really cared about the environment, you would focus on natural gas. You would focus on nuclear, and you would focus on the cleanest coal and oil. Where do you get those? The United States. If you really cared about the environment, because that's what actually reduces the number of particulates in the atmosphere. But if you didn't care about the environment, you would do all the stuff that they're doing. If you really just wanted to usher in socialism, it might make you feel good to say that I'm driving an electric car that was built in China. But when China pollutes and China builds factories every day that are dirty coal-fired, this is one planet. It's like the non-smoking section in the restaurant. There ain't no non-smoking section. It all smells like smoke. It's a globe, folks. It don't matter. So if you really cared about the environment, you would do all the things he said. But the point is, they care more about socialism than the environment. People having a gas stove ain't the problem. You know, it's what they're doing, throwing smokestacks in the air. We don't even do that anymore in America.
But they do it in China.
Of course they do it in China. And you know what? I've been to Shanghai, and it looks like Los Angeles did in the 70s. Those people have all kind of problems with breathing, and they have portable oxygen. I mean, it's miserable. They had to ban cars, I believe, in what was it, Beijing before the Olympics, just to get the air clear.
Okay, Robert. So we've talked about Josh Hawley. We talked about Lindsey Graham, talked about Ron DeSantis, J.D. Vance. You did a great job explaining kind of my opinion about J.D. Vance. But there's this other group that have become more politically active than expected. I think of Elon Musk and Twitter. I think of Peter Thiel, $10 million in Ohio he spent trying to get J.D. Vance elected. Couldn't spend enough to get Blake Masters elected.
Well, he spent the same $10 million in each state. It was the
McConnell those didn't.
The self-serving people who work for McConnell.
I think you call them thieves at times.
Well, yeah, and the money they spent electing Murkowski against a conservative, they couldn't put Masters in the Senate.
But let's stay there for a second. So you got Peter Thiel, you got Elon Musk, you got Vivek Ramaswamy, you've got David Sachs, you've got RFK Jr. Where do they figure in? It seems like the tech bros have always been opposite of the Republican Party. Why are the tech bros all of a sudden
it's not
more
all
in
the
line?
tech bros,
but a lot of the tech bros, some of the prominent tech bros.
Yeah, I mean, they're not monolithic either. And a lot of them, I would say, are more tech libertarian, free thought, free speech advocates who have found a new home in the Republican Party. And they've realized this is the place of free expression now. I mean, it wasn't
We're the Woodstock crowd.
Exactly. It wasn't always that way. It definitely wasn't that way. And so this is a new thing. And so, yeah, I think that they would find a home here. I think that you would see a lot of that part of business that really, I mean, Elon Musk, for example. There's another car company in America that started in America that makes the best electric cars in the world. Like that. I mean, think about that. We hadn't had a brand new car company on the scene in dozens and dozens of years, and they rocketed to the most valuable car company. Like, that's an American success story. I mean, what this guy's done in space said, hey, I see what you're paying in Russia. I can do it cheaper and do it better. That's an American success story. What he's doing with Star, this guy, I mean, this is somebody that is a great American. He's done amazing things. He wasn't born here. I mean, like, this is where we are today. And the fact that this Republican Party appeals to them is more of redefinition of the Republican Party. The fact that an RFK and a Tulsi Gabbard would be in that room, who do not express the same values, but are brought together and bound together by this free exchange of thought. I mean, even when CNN did the little test of the kids about what they knew about politics, and then they asked, all right, your parents are Democrats, your parents are Republicans, would they be okay with, Johnny coming over because his parents are supporting Kamala Harris? Would they be okay with Susie or Billy coming over because his parents support Trump? And you know what they found? The kids whose parents supported Trump were fine with the kids. Their parents were fine with kids who supported Harris. But the other way around was not the case. The resentment, your voice shouldn't be heard crowd is the other side now.
And the tech bros are free speech absolutists?
They're free speech absolutists.
You've got a right to say crazy things, stupid things, hurtful things.
You have a right to be wrong. That's what people don't understand about democracy. You have a right to be wrong. You have a right to make a mistake. You have a right to yell something on the street corner that is completely wrong.
Does it surprise you how blatantly supportive some Democrats appear to be on censoring other people's opinions? Misinformation, I think, is their word.
I didn't grow up with Democrats talking like that. So, yeah, it surprises the heck out of me. That is the kind of crap that I didn't like about what Republicans did.
How do you capitalize on that? I mean, how do you make that an issue? I think J.D. Vance, when they try to go down the January 6th road, and J.D. Vance said, I'm more concerned about censorship than I am a single moment in history. Obviously, we have regret. We condemn it. We wish it never happened. But I'm more interested in censorship. Good move or not?
I think important move. I think it's an important move to say, no matter how you look at the 2020 election, no matter what you think happened, what is not debatable, what there's polling data to prove is if that laptop story had been proven to be true, Biden wouldn't have won. They affected that election. no matter how you look at what happened, they affected that election. So I think what he's saying is results of an election that was interfered with are less important than the interfering. And I mean, for them, I mean, like the fact that those people signed that thing to say it was Russian disinformation, and the media has not shamed or canceled every one of those people is ridiculous. Those people put their reputation on the line. And you know why they did it? Because they knew when they were found out, nobody would say a darn thing. They knew it wasn't Russian disinformation.
Of course they did. And they were conspiring with the government agencies. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far. Let's and I want to get to the election because I don't want to keep it be so long. But what?
Don't you get more breaks for your wonderful sponsors?
Well, I mean, we do this. We kind of edit them in. We do the
okay.
Well, we were rambling about.
I was wondering we're talking about the boiled peanuts because I'm a customer.
Well, I mean, I've got you a case on the way. You know,
I'm a customer.
Our good friend Woody Swink, the Swink family, are going to send you some boiled peanuts on the house.
Well, and Amazon's going to be mad because they make money off me buying those. Well, peanuts.
I'm going to have a call set on Micky Finn's to send you a good bottle of Jefferson's bourbon. It'll make you. I know you're a Jefferson fan, as am I. Okay, let's do this.
I'm a Jefferson bourbon fan too.
Well, I mean, it's Jefferson's Ocean bourbon. It's good stuff. And our good friend Micky Finn's, or Rick Aver calls it Micky Finn's, will take good care of you there. Okay, let's go to today. You can't tell me what will happen in a week or two or three or four, but if the election were today, what are the primary concerns Robert Cahaly at Trafalgar has, and what is he paying close attention to?
What I'm paying close attention to right now is watching the Hispanic voter movement from where the high water mark that Trump had against Biden to where he was in 20. And he's in between there now. Now, he's already above where he was in 20 with Hispanic voters. So if this keeps up, that is a part of the Democrat coalition that's going to be cut away. That's significant. I'm also watching Gen Z males. Gen Z males, male and female, the biggest gender gap is with Gen Z. Biggest gender gap of the entire election. Gen Z males and Gen Z females look at things completely differently. And Gen Z males look up at millennial males and they don't like this redefinition. They want to go back to guys being guys. You know, no more shaming them for, you know, what they call it, irrational masculinity, or they don't like any of that.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. I mean, come on. When I saw that British Prime Minister saying that, I was like, you're done. But I mean, like, they want this kind of bro, like, they like it. So I'm watching them and watching the fact that I mean, they're evenly divided. So the only reason that Kamala is winning Gen Z is because of how big the divide is on the girl side. But it's evenly divided on the boy side. Actually, Trump has a little advantage. So, but it comes together, and it's nowhere near the lead that Democrats are expecting with that age group. Senior voters, people are like, why do the senior voters seem to be voting Democrat more? Like, that's just, I didn't realize they were liberal. I'm like, guys, greatest generation and silent generation are dying, and the baby boomers are replacing them, and they were always more liberal. So I'm not shocked. I mean, that is kind of,
that would be the Woodstock crowd.
Yeah, that's there. There were a lot of, there was a lot of squares in that group and a lot of hip people. But I mean, just in using their language at the time, but they just tend to be a little more liberal than the crowds before. So it's something the Republicans have to fight for, and there is a fight going on with them. There's definitely a fight, but what I'm less concerned about is this, suburban women. If a suburban woman doesn't like Trump, there's almost nothing by now, with everything that's been done, with all the evidence about crime, like that won over a lot of people. But if she still doesn't like Trump, she's not going to.
Why doesn't she like Trump?
This,
He's a jerk.
I think that it just some of the stuff that he said, they believe a lot of the, I have watched the term that the court decided there was a sexual assault turned into rape, like at the same thing. And like, that's just an opinion of a court. There's no evidence and there's no video. No, that's just he said, she said, and the jury liked what she said. I mean, that's all that is. And so, but they believe a lot of these things and they've got their opinions. And you know what? It's America. They have a right to their opinions. And you're not going to change them. But watching what's going to determine this election is what happens with those black voters that are moving.
They're moving, Robert. I mean, we've been told that forever.
But every single election Trump's been in,
males in particular,
they've gone up. Yeah, younger. They've gone up every single election. So I mean, like he set a record every time, more and more and more. And so I mean, black voters used to vote Republican a long time ago. There's a lot of things that happened between Kennedy and Nixon that changed all that. But that election that was one that changed things a lot. But so that group is moving. And there's no way Kamala Harris will get Obama-like numbers there. So it's the groups that can move. And then the other group is what I would call, for lack of a better term, the country club types who just they think Trump isn't the guy I'd like at the club. But maybe if no one's looking, might vote for him. But they're very hard to tell where they really are because
hard to poll.
Yeah, they're hard to poll because they're real. Those are the ones who would hide their votes. And the reasons people hide their votes has also changed. 2016, they didn't want to be shamed. 2024, they don't want to be on a list. People don't know who's asking. They're not trusting. They are very worried that there will be ramifications.
So there's that degree of paranoia amongst the electorate.
And, I wouldn't call, what was the old saying? It's not paranoia if it's true.
No, Nixon said that.
Yeah. And the thing is, there has been some, like it or not, there's been things like a family who was praying in front of the abortion clinic that had a SWAT team bust their door down with guns drawn. I mean, there's been memos about FBI focusing on Catholics. I mean, there's been a lot of things that scare people. So being on a list that somebody would have access to is a little scary. They don't know. They don't know who's doing it. I mean, we have a pledge about our data. It's on our website. We don't give it to anybody. We don't sell it. We don't give it to campaigns. We don't give it to anybody. And we actually have a practice of the first thing we do when we get the voter list is we pull all the names off. We literally delete the name column. I don't want to know your name. I don't want to have it. If I got hacked, I don't want to have had it. Not that I want to be hacked again. Don't want to be hacked again. I want to be clear about that. But there's nothing to get, so there's no sense in you doing it. I'm just sending a message to hackers. But I just need
no names.
No names. There's nothing for you to get. Don't store Social Security numbers either. None of it. But it scares people. Just in the way that if you take somebody who's a huge Second Amendment person, they don't want to ever be gun registration because they'd have a list to come pick up the guns with. These people don't want big tech or big government to have access to a list because they're afraid that they would be targeted. And so that's quite different than simply being shy. And that's why shy only works with a live call. This works on anything. Because you can be on a list even if you just did a text. So there's that. And so keeping track of things I'm looking at what the difference is, which ones are hidden votes. And also just kind of a sense of turnout and enthusiasm. The one thing that's changed with Kamala is where the Democrats had a huge disadvantage in enthusiasm, it's gone. Enthusiasm is pretty much even for both sides. And so enthusiasm is a huge thing. And I guess one of the last things I'm looking at is how this thing plays out in the Middle East and the ramifications that has in the Arab and Muslim. And they're many are the same, but some are not in Michigan. There's a lot of Arab Christians in Michigan, but they all kind of see a lot of the same things, how they feel about the policy, because Kamala Harris is in a terribly difficult position of walking a tightrope. She is, if she gets too far in the administration and proceeds to be too pro-Israel, these people voted against Biden being the nominee and were uncommitted. And if they sit it out, she can't win Michigan. So how she deals with that, how the administration deals with that, how the administration lets the concern about Michigan affect how they deal with things is something I'm watching very carefully. And so these are the factors that I think are going to determine this thing one way or the other, and notwithstanding anything else. I mean, the second attempt on Trump's life certainly moved the ball and made people think there's something fishy going on. God forbid a third attempt.
What do you say to people who say they'll try to kill him again? I mean, that's about as crazy as it gets.
Yeah,
until you think about it, they tried it twice.
And the fact that they got that, how in the world can you get that close?
Who is they, Robert? When I said they will, I mean,
nobody knows who they is.
Is there a they?
You're asking me, is there a grand conspiracy? I have no idea. I'm not going to say no, because I've seen two things that everything I thought I knew about Secret Service were not possible happen. So I don't know.
And it didn't happen once, it happened twice.
Two things that just, there's no way that should have happened.
And you kind of scratch your head.
You do scratch your head. I mean,
and I think if you got a brain in your head, you should scratch your head.
And you pray it's incompetence.
Sure. You hope and pray it is.
You pray that's all it is.
And it's not a grand conspiracy. Because we're
thank God there's so many good agents. The guy who spotted the barrel of the gun, I mean, thank God for them. So, I mean, this is not an agent level thing. Certainly with what's been said about the FBI, it's not an agent level thing. The people on the ground are fine. It's always been a few people in charge everywhere.
The bureaucratic elite. Let's do this as we close. Let's do this. And kind of give me the quick synopsis. Swing state Arizona looks like what?
At this point, I think Arizona looks positive. Positive for Trump. Probably due to immigration, they got it head on. And hopefully all the machines work great on election day and not just the ones in the Republican areas go down.
Nevada.
In Maricopa County. Nevada, I've been kicked.
You've learned a lesson.
I've been kicked in the butt 3 times by Nevada. What they do, the culinary union and the service workers union do the last 4 days will make all the polls irrelevant. If I could poll it Monday, maybe. I've said Republicans had a shot in Nevada 3 times, and I've been wrong 3 times. I will not be kicked the 4th time by Nevada. So Republicans may win Nevada, but I ain't gonna predict it. Maybe I'd curse it.
You talked about the Arab population in Michigan today.
Today, coin flip.
Wisconsin,
coin flip.
Pennsylvania,
Trump.
Elaborate a second on that, because that probably encourages Republicans when you say that.
Well, I'm just trying to tell him what I think it is. I think that that Biden would have done better than she will. She's just not selling in Pennsylvania. These people who depend on fracking don't believe her. And a lot of the blue-collar workers don't believe she's one of them. They did believe Joe Biden was one of them. They believe Joe Biden looked out for them. They do not relate to her. They do not relate to her running mate. And there's just something to be said about the energy that emanates from Butler.
And I think he's going back to Butler.
He is.
If I'm not mistaken.
But there's just something about that. we've done a lot of side measurements, about what I think the hidden vote is, and I think it's huge in Pennsylvania.
North Carolina.
Trump. And because North Carolina has a history, and North Carolina's had 3 governors, candidate Republicans who lost, and yet picked up both U.S. Senate seats, reelected a U.S. senator.
Split tickets?
Even in 2022, elected a U.S. senator comfortably, and grew their House and Senate majorities. In 2022, North Carolinians split their tickets. It's not like South Carolina was a straight ticket voting. North Carolina, they do not mind splitting the ticket.
You spent a lot of time in Atlanta. You've led me to believe that Georgia concerns you.
It concerns me a lot, and it's a lot because no matter what's been said, there's probably 100,000 to 150,000 of kind of Brian Kemp style establishment Republicans in kind of a ring around northern, like almost northwest to northeast Atlanta, and that are in these suburbs and these nice communities. And, he's just not the guy they want in their club. And they didn't like the feud between he and Kemp. And I know they've been working on putting that together, but that almost looks like, a forced friendship. So how those people end up going, do they hold their nose and vote for Trump? Or do they vote against every one of their economic interests and vote for her? I don't know where they go right now. And those people worry me. It has the least hidden vote, we think, of any state we've measured. So I think that one's going to be really tight. I would say if it was right now, I might even give her the advantage there. But it's just, that one's coin flip.
Last question. Whatever happened in 2020, we got to move on. Trump says the election was stolen. I've never used the word stolen. I've never used the word cheat. I've researched and investigated. You've probably done this far more than I have. There are some things that happened that leave me wondering. And I'm talking about general assemblies allowing state, office holders to do certain things that we believe violate the Constitution.
But here's the thing. I don't. Because I believe very simply the Constitution says every state picks their electors by any means the state.
You've been very clear of that.
That's what it says. Any means the state legislators, not the governors, legislators say. So if a state legislature said, we're going to give it to the tallest candidate, that's the law. That is who would get the votes. So if there was cheating in a state, I'm not saying it was, if it was blatant, and the state legislature acted by not acting, by not doing anything to change, then that's their opinion.
That's their right.
And it is the right of any state legislature to look at something and say, cheating and we don't care. Or we don't think there's cheat. Whatever they say is what they get to do. Those legislators have decided the method those electors will be picked. We just saw it on the front lines when Nebraska refused to change its method, which every state, 48 are the same and 2 are different, by congressional district and 1 for winning the whole state. It wasn't always the states did it this way. They used to just have the delegation send people to go vote, like the College of Cardinals, which was what this was actually modeled on. But so none of that matters. If the legislature chooses to see or not see or ignore or enforce, doesn't matter. It really doesn't even matter if there's cheating. Because if the state legislature chooses to allow it, it's their right to do.
So does election integrity concern you?
Yeah, it always concerns. Do I believe we have far? The only way I would be totally comfortable with early voting is if every early voting site in America had a camera on the box 24/7, and like blockchain, everybody could look at everything. Chain of custody is the only thing that bothers me. But yeah, would it be great for the all to be one day? Sure. I mean, absolutely. And would it be great for, I think even more than that is count them the same day. North Carolina, Florida, Texas are big states. And yet they're capable of counting all their votes. What is wrong with you, Pennsylvania? What is wrong with you, Georgia? What is wrong with you, Arizona? I mean, Florida is big. Lots of old people, lots of mistakes. I mean, Texas is bigger than all of you. Why is this so? The American public would be a whole lot happier and a whole lot more believing if they knew election night. Why is it we can know election night in so many other modern countries, not America? That is what leads to people wondering what's going on in the dark.
That's well said.
And until we have some kind of a blockchain system where everybody can see everything, yeah, election integrity always, and just simply, if we just had voter ID, everybody agrees in voter ID, and yet we don't have it. And yet we don't have it in so many states. You simply don't have to have a show on ID. That is insane.
Are you more frustrated with the Cowboys, the Braves, or the Gamecocks? That's the most important question I can ask.
Well, my brother would kill me if he hears this, but I'm used to Carolina.
Easy now.
No. Carolina is a runaway bride. You might think she's going to marry you. She ain't. She's going to walk down that aisle. She's going to turn around halfway, or she's going to get there and she's going to lift the veil and it ain't going to be her. She's never going to marry you. Don't believe it. If you always assume she's running out of the back of the church, one day, if somehow she married you, it'd be the best day of her life. But if you just assume she's leaving, you start with the right minds. I knew we weren't going to be to LSU. I love them. And I live with it. I mean, I'm old enough to have my heart broken by Navy.
All right. There's your commentary on the game called
in
the Braves.
1984.
The Braves.
We got our World Series. I mean, we got one in modern times. We got one in the 90s. So I'm okay.
We got one in 2020.
So I'm saying we got one in modern times and we got one in the 90s.
I got you.
I'm pretty pleased.
What was a better team, the 2020 team or the 90s?
The 90s in general?
Yeah. I mean, that run they had with Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz.
The fact that team didn't win four World Series is the biggest tragedy.
That's part of the great travesty in modern era baseball.
Absolutely, because you know what matters? Closing. Winning at the end, not choking. Which brings us to the Cowboys.
There you go.
With the highest paid. When I heard they made him the highest paid quarterback, I literally felt sick at my stomach. I don't dislike him. He doesn't close. He doesn't close. This guy doesn't do well in the playoffs, and that is what matters.
So Jerry knows that, doesn't he?
I don't know what Jerry knows. I mean, Jerry has built a great team, but...
He's built a valuable team.
Exactly. And do you know how much more valuable it would be if they won a Super Bowl? I mean, it kills me because he's just not the best. He's just not the best. The guy's talented as he can be, but he just hasn't. And I hope he puts it together this year. But I've already seen a bunch of. Let me tell you something. When they go down there and they choke in the red zone, every time they kick a field, and I hate that we got such a good field goal kicker, because I hate kicking field goals. Field goals are failure. When you kick a 40-yard field goal, that's a failure. When you kick a 50-yard field goal, okay. 60, okay. But a 40 or 30, it's a failure. You choked, and I don't like it. And how many times you choked is whether I think you're playing good ball.
Should Jerry, the owner, fire Jerry, the GM? I'm not going to speak about what Jerry should and shouldn't do. You like him or not, as a Cowboy fan? He's fun.
I like him. I definitely am a Jerry fan. But, I mean, we all make mistakes. And I think Jerry's mistake is he likes people. Dak Prescott is a good person. He's an easy guy to like. I like Dak Prescott as a person. I don't like that I wish Dak Prescott said, we'll make you the richest man in the history of the game based on what you do this season. I wish that was the deal they gave him. I just like to see some of these guys have to get to the end. Tom Brady is Tom Brady because of what he did against the Falcons. They come back. And when it was on the line, he delivered again and again and again. And that not choking thing is everything in sports. I mean, that's everything. And it is, I mean,
I hear the frustration.
Yeah,
I've enjoyed it.
It's genuine.
How can people keep up with your work? I mean, you and Matt have a podcast. I mean, Trafalgar's out all over the. I catch you on Twitter. How can they keep up with you and your work?
Twitter's probably the best way. X is probably the best way. Robert Cahaly, at Robert Cahaly, at Trafalgar_group. We kind of share each other's stuff. Obviously, we have Facebook, we have Instagram. So, True Social, we're everywhere.
The podcast is when and named what?
It's called Polling Plus. You type in the word polling, it's the first one that comes up. And Matt had a lot of damage from the hurricane, and I had half of my places I couldn't get into. So this was probably the only week we haven't done one. And next we will be back at it. And it's a lot of fun. We have a good time. And you hear a lot of things that you hear from us, and then a week or so later you'll see it on TV.
There you go. I could vouch for that. Thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yep, absolutely.
Absolutely.